All right, you bring your jury in, please. Take your time.
I didn't pay attention.
Thank you. Have a seat, please. And counsel, will be your next witness. Okay, please step up next to me, please. You raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
You have a seat. You tell me your first and last name, we'll sit on both.
Lisa Burgee, B-U-R-G-E-E.
Thank you. Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you. Your Honor, just for the court, we have pre-marked all the photographs, so it should expedite things. And where are you employed?
I'm employed at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
And what is your position there?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist.
And how long have you been with the TBI?
I've been there for 4 years.
And prior to TBI, can you tell the jury about your educational background?
So I began with my Bachelor of Science degree in biology from LaGrange College in Georgia, and then I also have a Master's of Science in Forensic Science from Marshall University in West Virginia.
And did you obtain those degrees prior to going to work for TBI?
Yes, sir.
And as a TBI special agent, you're assigned to the laboratory, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Agent Burgee, in this case, did you actually go to the crime scene in this
No.
instance? So anything you did was analyzed at the lab, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what area have you specialized in the TBI lab?
I work in the forensic biology unit.
And can you explain to the jury what the forensic biology unit is and what you all do?
We are responsible for the collection and analysis of biological evidence.
And what would that consist of?
Typically it's body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva, as well as what's called touch DNA, which would be DNA from skin cells.
And you mentioned collection. In this instance, you did not actually collect evidence, is that right?
No, I did not.
You received evidence and you did the analysis.
Correct.
Agent Burgee, have you, am I saying that right?
It's Burgee.
Burgee, Agent Burgee, have you testified as an expert witness in the area of forensic biology in Tennessee courts previous to today?
Yes.
And been certified as accepted as an expert?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to board nomination? No, sir. All right, I'll let you repeat.
And Agent Burgee, what I'm primarily going to talk to you today about is DNA analysis. And first of all, can you explain how you go about analyzing DNA and maybe what it is for the jurors?
Sure. So DNA is a chemical in your cells, and it basically tells your cells and your body how to work. For the most part, about 99% of the DNA is the same between individuals, but what I look at is about the 1% that's different. So if I have a sample, what I'll do is I'll take it through a chemical process, and at the end of that process, I'll have a DNA profile from that sample to be able to compare to.
And that DNA profile would be unique to that individual, is that right?
Except for identical twins, yes.
Okay. And in this particular, in all instances of DNA, do you also attempt to receive a known sample from a subject?
I do, as part of the analysis for comparison, you want to have a known sample from individuals involved to be able to compare to the evidence samples.
And you say a known sample, what does that mean?
Typically, it's a swab from the inside of the cheek, and we know where it came from. It came from a specific individual, so we know that that DNA profile is from that individual.
So as a starting point, you would identify the known DNA and then compare it to DNA that you might find in various pieces of evidence. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And in this particular case, let me hand you Exhibit 46, which has previously been marked. And can you identify that?
Yes, sir.
And what is that, Agent Burgee?
This is the known blood sample from Jerry Ridge.
And did you test that blood sample?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile of Mr. Ridge?
Yes, I was.
And also, did you obtain, and I'll show you Exhibit 18, and did you obtain a known blood sample of the defendant, Angela Kilgore?
This was not a blood sample. This was a buccal sample, so it was the swab from the inside of the cheek.
And from that swab, you can obtain DNA, is that correct?
Yes.
And were you able to analyze or develop a known DNA for Ms. Kilgore?
Yes, I was.
And so in the process of your work, you would compare objects to both of their DNAs, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And Agent Burgee, did you obtain various items of evidence to examine at the crime lab?
I did, yes.
Okay. Let me hand you, first of all, what's been previously marked as Exhibit 54, and I'll ask if you can identify that.
I can, yes.
And what is that?
This is a pair of boots from Angela Kilgore.
And did you test those for DNA?
I did, yes.
And let me ask you, I noticed, and this has come up during the trial, that your analysis will show, in some cases, the presence of blood, and in other cases, you will develop that it's the hemoglobin is showing it's human blood. Can you explain why that differs, or how that process works?
So when I'm testing for blood, there are several different tests that I'll do. The initial step is 2 different color change tests. One will change a bluish-green color, and the other will change a pink color. So if both of those have the color change, they're positive, which would indicate blood. But it's not necessarily human blood. It could react with animal blood. So the next step would be another color change test, which is specific for hemoglobin, which is a component of blood. So that step would then basically be able to say that it's human blood.
And in some cases, you're not able to do the second test, is that right?
That's correct. It does consume a portion of the sample, so if it's a limited amount of blood, then I may decide to forego that second test to be able to get a DNA profile instead.
Okay. And that's due to the size of the sample.
Yes.
I'm going to hand you a series of pictures, which we've marked 61 through 69, and I'll ask if you can identify those photographs.
I can, yes.
John, we would ask those to be moved into evidence, and I will put them up on the screen, beginning with number 61. All right. There's a pointer. There it is. And can you tell the jurors what it is we're looking at in that photograph?
This is the pair of boots from Angela Kilgore that was contained in the bucket.
Okay. Those would be the brown boots.
Yes.
And there's writing at the top, the 48A and LED. Are those your initials?
They are, yes.
Okay. And when was this picture? I mean, when in the process is this picture taken?
This was at the very beginning when I first opened the bucket and removed the boots.
And what is the first thing you do when you remove the boots? How do you start your analysis?
Typically what I'll do is I'll take a picture and then I'll start with a visual exam, just looking over the evidence to see if I see anything.
And in this instance, is that the process you followed?
Yes.
And if we could bring up the next photograph, exhibit number 62. We're looking at Exhibit 63, and what is it we're seeing in this photograph?
That is the outside side of the right boot.
And then can we go back to Exhibit 62? And on Exhibit 62, there are some notes. There's some writing on the photograph, and can you tell what we're looking at in that photograph?
So that is one area of reddish-brown staining that I noticed, and I did the initial color change test, and that was positive, and I decided to not do the second color change test in order to take that onto DNA.
And were you able to develop DNA from that location?
Yes, I was.
And who did the DNA, who was a match for the DNA in that location?
The partial DNA profile obtained is consistent with Jerry Ridge.
Okay. When you say the partial DNA profile, what are you referring to?
It means that it wasn't a complete DNA profile that I was able to develop. I'm looking at, in this case, there were several areas of the DNA, and I didn't get information at all of those areas.
But you were able to identify it as a partial DNA profile, Mr. Ridge?
Yes.
Can you bring up picture 64? And in this photograph, Agent Burgee, what are we looking at?
That is the inside side of the left boot.
Okay. And those are your initials and your writing, is that right?
Yes, sir.
If you would bring up Exhibit 65, and can you identify what we're looking at in this photograph?
So that is the heel area of the left boot, and there was an area of RBS. When I tested it, that area was negative.
Okay. And if you would bring up the next exhibit, would you describe what we're looking for, what we're looking at in this picture?
That is the outside side of the left boot.
And did you find anything on the outside left side of the boot?
I'm not sure.
Bring up the next exhibit, Agent Burgee, and we'll...
Yes, I believe there's an area by the sole there.
And is that what we're looking at? We're looking at Exhibit 67?
Yes, you can see the black, essentially parentheses right there, and there's the area of RBS.
Okay. And were you able to develop DNA from that?
Yes, I was.
And who did the DNA match?
The DNA profile matches Jerry Ridge.
And let's go to Exhibit 68. And again, we're looking at the outside side of the left boot, and there's some initials down there. And what are we looking at in that photograph?
There was also a reddish-brown stain on the heel, and I tested that, and it was negative.
Okay. If you bring up the next photograph. And we were looking at the top of the left boot, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
And tell the jurors what we're looking at there.
There were some areas of RBS inside the parentheses that I swabbed, and I tested those, and those were positive.
And did the DNA match anyone?
There was a partial DNA profile obtained, which was consistent with Jerry Ridge.
So as to the boots themselves, Agent Burgee, where all did you find the blood that you were able to match DNA to?
There were stains on the side of the right boot near the seam, the side of the right boot and sole near the middle of the boot, the side of the sole of the right boot near the heel area, the side of the sole of the left boot, and then the top of the left boot.
And when you mention all those, they all came back to Jerry Ridge?
Yes, sir.
To show you the next object. And I'll show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 56, which is a 3-bladed knife. And do you recognize that?
I do,
And
yes.
is that an item that you analyzed?
It is,
Did you
yes.
see that way from Agent Wilson?
I believe so. I can double check on that.
It came through the normal, you didn't personally receive it, it came in evidence at the lab.
That's correct, yes.
And Agent Burgee, with all these items that you analyzed, when you were complete, when your work was completed, did you give them back to the evidence text and then eventually went back to Agent Wilson?
They do. I returned it to evidence where it was stored in the vault until it was picked up.
As far as the knife, did you conduct an analysis of the knife?
I did, yes.
And let me show you 3 photographs that we have marked as Exhibits 70, 71, and 72, and I'll ask if you can identify those photographs.
Yes.
And if we could put exhibit number 70 on the screen. And Agent Burgee, what are we looking at in exhibit 70?
That is the 3-bladed, essentially pocket knife that I received.
You received that, and did that appear to have red, brownish stains on it?
It did, yes.
And did you do testing as far as the presence of blood in that particular object?
I did, yes.
And did your test reveal the presence of blood?
It did, yes.
And were you able to develop further tests to determine whether it was human blood or not?
On this one, I did not. All of the stains were pretty limited, so I saved the sample for DNA testing.
And we could bring up the next exhibit 71. And on that exhibit, it shows some handwriting towards the bottom. Did you find, to identify DNA in those areas?
Yes.
And could you describe to the jury where you found the DNA and who it vanished?
Just specifically these 2 areas, or
We'll start with these 2 areas.
Okay. So there's a stain on the middle of blade 1, and that was a mixture of at least 2 individuals, and due to the limited profile, interpretation was inconclusive for that one. There was also the stain to the left side in the hinge area. That DNA,
Point that out with the
sure,
pointer.
right there.
Okay.
It's kind of at the base of the blade and then also in the hinge area as well. That DNA profile matches Jerry Ridge.
And did you find other locations where you're able to identify DNA?
Yes, I did.
And where would that be?
There was also a stain on blade 2 as well, what I labeled as blade 2.
Yes. And where in the blade 2 would that stain appear? Go back to exhibit 70. You would look on the screen, Agent Burgee, exhibit 70. Is that the area you're referring to?
Yes, it was essentially in the kind of nail area where you pull out the blade. There was some reddish brown staining there as well.
And were you able to obtain DNA profile on that?
I was, yes.
And who did that match?
The DNA profile obtained, it was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge.
Was there any other profile obtained from that mixture?
The minor contributor profile was limited, so interpretation was inconclusive on the minor contributor.
And would you bring up 73? Brought up exhibit 72, Agent Burgee, and would you tell the jurors what we're looking at there?
That's a different photograph. We already discussed that the base of blade 1 into the hinge area is where the RBS was.
Show you what's been marked today as exhibit 15. It's actually marked as exhibit 15 of the crime scene. And can you identify that item?
I can, yes.
And what is that, Agent Burgee?
There are paper towels from the crime scene as well as a glove from the crime scene.
Is that an item that you analyzed?
It is, yes.
And I'm going to hand you a series of photographs, exhibits 73 through 82, and I'll ask if you can identify those photographs.
Yes, sir.
We have placed what's been marked as exhibit 73 on the screen, and would you tell the jurors what we're looking at in that photograph, Agent Burgee?
That is a photograph of a latex glove as well as several pieces of paper towels.
And I noticed a brown paper bag that looks like the bottom's been cut out of. Is that how it arrived at the crime lab?
No, that's after we opened it to examine it.
Right, but that's the bag that would have come in initially?
Yes.
Okay. And then you opened it to do the examinations. If we could bring up the next photograph, and let's start with the glove. We'll do exhibit number 74. And Agent Burgee, we have exhibit 74 on the screen, and would you describe to the jurors what they're looking at in that photograph?
That is a close-up picture of the glove, and you can see most of the glove. There's RBS, and then there's an area over here that I tested.
And what were your test results of that area?
That area was positive for the initial color change test, and then I also did perform that second color change test, which indicated human hemoglobin.
So that would be the presence of human blood on the glove.
Yes.
From that area, were you able to do a DNA match?
Yes, I was.
And who did the DNA match?
The DNA profile was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge, and the minor contributor was a limited profile, so interpretation was inconclusive.
Bring up exhibit 75. And we have exhibit 75 on the screen, Agent Burgee, and what are we looking at here?
This is another side of the glove, and you can see there's an arrow pointing to an area that I also tested on the glove.
And what were your results of those tests?
So the initial color change test, both of those were positive. And then for the DNA testing, the DNA profile was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge.
Were you able to identify the other contributor?
Interpretation of the minor contributor was inconclusive.
And you mentioned that both tests were positive. That means it was human blood?
Yes.
You bring up exhibit number 76. In Agent Burgee, we have exhibit 76, and you have some notes down there. It also appears is there a cut in the glove?
Yes, you can see right in this area, the glove appeared to be cut.
And you've also got some notes down there towards the bottom. Chad, if you back it up a little bit. Agent Burgee, is that a different area that you analyzed, or is that the one we talked about a few minutes ago?
No, this is a third area that I tested for blood. It's on the inside as received of the glove, and both of those color change tests were positive, indicating human blood, and then I also performed DNA testing on that area as well.
What were the results of your DNA testing?
The DNA profile matches Jerry Ridge.
You bring up the next exhibit, 77, and Agent Burgee, what are we looking at in exhibit 77?
This is also a picture of the glove, and in addition to testing areas of reddish-brown staining, I also swabbed some areas in an attempt to collect touch DNA. So I swabbed in between each finger and along the sides of each finger of the glove, avoiding areas of staining.
And were you able to develop DNA from that test?
From the test, yes.
And were you able to match the DNA that you found in a particular individual?
Yes.
And who would that individual be?
So the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least two individuals, The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge. The limited minor contributor profile is consistent with Angela Kilgore.
And you also did some testing on the paper products that were contained in there, is that correct?
I did, yes.
And you bring up exhibit 78, and you would, Agent Burgee, Exhibit 78, tell the jurors what we're looking at here
That is a picture just of the paper towels.
that you received at the crime lab.
Yes.
We bring up Exhibit 79, and what are we looking at in Exhibit 79?
That is one of the paper towels, and there is an arrow being drawn to an area of RBS that I tested.
And were you able to determine whether it was blood?
Yes, it was human blood.
And were you able to do a DNA match for that?
I was, yes.
And who did it come back to?
For this one, the DNA profile obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge.
And were you able to develop the other profile?
The minor contributor profile was limited, so it was inconclusive.
Let's look at Exhibit 80. You have Exhibit 80 up there, and Agent Burgee, what are we looking at here?
You can see there's an area here of reddish-brown staining that was tested, and it tested positive for human hemoglobin and human blood, and then I also performed DNA testing.
And who did the DNA come back to?
For this sample, no DNA profile was able to be obtained.
Okay. Please look at Exhibit 81. And in this exhibit, is that just another one of the towels you tested?
I believe that's the opposite side of the paper towel that was just shown.
You could bring up Exhibit 82. And what are we looking at here?
I believe that the same paper towel that was just shown.
Were you able to identify any DNA to match it with someone from the paper towels,
From the
towels themselves?
There were 2 DNA profiles from the towels that were identified.
And who were they identified as being the provider?
For the 3rd paper towel, the partial DNA profile matches Jerry Ridge, and then for the 4th paper towel, that was the one that I've already told you, was a mixture of at least 2 individuals, and the major contributor profile was Jerry Ridge.
Agent Burgee, let me show you photographs marked 83 through 86, and I will ask if you can identify those items.
Yes, I can.
And I will hand you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 16, and I'll ask, can you identify that item?
Yes, I can.
And tell the jurors what that is, Agent Burgee.
This is a lighter fluid can from the crime scene.
Okay. And did you receive that to do testing on?
Yes, I did.
And did you perform testing on that object?
Yes, I did.
If you would, Chad, bring up the exhibit. And Agent Burgee, if you would look at Exhibit 83 that is on the screen, describe what we're looking at in Exhibit 83.
This is the top of the lighter fluid can, and this area here was the area that I tested. I did the initial color change test, and it was positive. And then later, in addition to that initial test, I also did the second color change test, which indicated human hemoglobin as well.
Were you able to develop DNA?
Yes, I was.
And what were the results of the DNA?
For the stain from the top of the can, the DNA profile obtained matches Jerry Ridge.
Did you obtain any other profile from that particular location?
No, I did not.
You bring up Exhibit 84. In Agent Burgee, we have Exhibit 84 on the screen. That looks like RBS on there, am I right?
Yes, sir.
And did you test, you have an arrow drawn to one location, I believe covering the word contents on the back of the can. Can you describe what we're looking at there?
So this is the back of the can, and this is the area here that I tested. Initially, I did the first color change test, and those were positive, and then later I did the second color change test, and it was also positive, which indicated human hemoglobin and human blood.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile?
Yes, I was.
Were you able to match that DNA profile to anyone in particular?
Yes, sir.
Who would that be?
The DNA profile obtained matches Jerry Ridge.
Go to Exhibit 85. In Exhibit 85, can you describe what we're looking at there?
This is the front of the lighter fluid can, and it's difficult to see, but there's an area up here. There has some reddish-brown staining that I tested.
Were you able to determine if it was blood?
Yes, sir.
Was it blood?
Yes, and it was human blood.
Okay. And were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that?
Yes.
And what were the results of the DNA profile?
The DNA profile obtained was consistent with being a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore. Due to the limited minor profile obtained, interpretation of the minor profile is inconclusive.
Would you bring up 86? And Agent Burgee, is that just another photograph of the Zippo can?
Yes, that's a photograph of the back of the can.
And was this taken as you begin your process?
Correct. It would be one of the first things that I took.
Agent Burgee, if you would, you also did some work on a red Chevrolet truck, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
They hand you a series of photographs, and I'll ask if you can identify those.
Yes.
For the record, Your Honor, I have shown her exhibits 87 through 93, which she has identified. She has a lot of order. Could you bring up exhibit 93? Agent Burgee, we have Exhibit 93. Can you describe for the jurors what we're looking at in that particular photograph?
This is a red Chevy Colorado that was submitted to the lab at the TBI Crime Lab for testing.
And was this the Colorado from the defendant, Angela Kilgore?
Yes, sir.
And Agent Burgee, did you actually process that truck?
I did, yes.
And and this photograph is taken at the lab?
Yes.
And how do you go about processing a vehicle like that?
So initially when I first go down and look at the vehicle, I'll take a series of photographs from the outside, and then I'll begin opening the doors, taking pictures of the inside before anything is removed. And then after that, I'll start removing the items from the vehicle and take an inventory of the items and take pictures as well. And then I'll also, depending on the item, if I'm looking for blood in the vehicle, then I'll begin my testing.
Bring up Exhibit 82, please. 82, yes. 87, I'm sorry. Can't read you right. Burgee, we have brought Exhibit 87 up on the screen. Can you describe what we're looking at in that photograph?
This is the rear passenger side door, and the arrow is pointing to an area that's just below the speaker on the door.
And you have some writing there, and can you describe to the jurors what you found?
Yes, so there was an area of reddish brown staining there that I swabbed, and I did the initial 2 color change tests, and they both were positive, which indicated the presence of blood.
And would that be human blood?
Let me just want to make sure. So the sample wasn't large enough to do the second test, so I did not perform the test to determine if it was human blood in order to save sample for DNA testing.
And were you able to do DNA analysis?
Yes, I was.
And what were the results of your DNA analysis?
The DNA profile matches Jerry Ridge.
You would bring up Exhibit 92. We have Exhibit 92 on the screen, Agent Burgee, and would you describe to the jurors what we're looking at there?
So as I'm taking my inventory, I also lay everything out on a piece of white paper to keep it separate to keep it basically organized into what area of the vehicle it was found. So these are the items found in the front passenger seat.
And I noticed there's a darker plaid shirt there on the right side. Is that an object that you did some testing on?
It is, yes.
You could bring up Exhibit 91, please. Exhibit 91 on the screen, Agent Burgee, which you describe to the jurors what we're looking at in that particular photograph.
So the blue plaid shirt that was from the front passenger seat, I collected it when I was processing the vehicle. And then this is an image that I took in the lab after it had been collected and submitted as evidence.
Go to Exhibit 90. Okay, Exhibit 90 on the screen, Agent Burgee, and we're looking at 31A3 with an arrow. What is that?
So there is an area of silver marking here indicating that there was a reaction. For this exhibit, I performed a different test. It's called Blue Star, which reacts with blood. So these markings here are indicating that there was a reaction in that area.
And with the reaction would indicate the presence of what?
It indicates the presence of blood. It also reacts with other chemicals, so it's just an initial test.
And did you do further testing to determine whether it wasn't that blood? Or were you able to?
I did swab that area, yes.
And what were the results of that?
So that area did react positive for those that first set of color change tests, the pink and the blue-green.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that area?
I was, yes.
And who did the DNA profile match?
The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals. The limited major profile is consistent with a mixture of Angela Kilgore and Jerry Ridge.
And you said 3 profiles, the third party was unidentified.
Right, the limited minor profile was inconclusive.
If you could bring up 89, please. We have Exhibit 89 on the screen. Agent Burgee, and what are we looking at in this photograph?
So this is essentially the same area that was previously pictured. This was the stain we just talked about. And then there's also an area circled here on the cuff. And then there's also an area here, essentially inside the cuff, that was also...
Let's start and talk about the area on the top of the cuff. What did your testing show was there?
I swabbed that area and it was positive for the presence of blood. I again did not test for human hemoglobin because it was a limited sample.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile on that?
Yes, I was.
And did that match anyone in particular?
The DNA profile obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore.
And if you would bring up the Exhibit 88, please. And Agent Burgee, we're looking at Exhibit 88, and describe what we're looking at for the jurors.
This is that stain that was inside on the edge of the cuff there that I was referring to.
And were you able to obtain a DNA profile from that stain?
I was, yes.
And were you able to identify this blood?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to do enough to get to human blood or just blood?
No, sir, I did not do the human hemoglobin test.
And as far as the DNA profile, did you obtain a profile from that?
Yes, sir.
And what did that profile match?
The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Jerry Ridge.
Agent Burgee, hand you appears to be a blue plaid shirt, at least a bag containing it. Can you identify that object?
Yes, I can.
And what is that, Agent Burgee?
This contains the shirt from the front passenger seat.
And that's the shirt you had describing in these last photographs.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we had that marked as Exhibit 94. We've moved that into evidence. Go ahead. Burgee, let me show you what's been previously marked collectively as Exhibit 57, A, B, and C, and I'll ask if you can identify those items.
Yes, I can.
And what are they?
Exhibit A is a $100 bill from Angela Kilgore, and then B and C are both $1 bills from Angela Kilgore.
And did you test those items for the presence of blood or DNA?
I did, yes.
And what were the results of your tests on each of those items?
For the $100 bill, I performed the initial color change test, which were the pink and blue tests, and those are positive. I did not do the human hemoglobin test. The DNA profile matches Angela Kilgore. For one of the dollar bills, I tested 2 different areas. There was a stain on the front and a stain on the back. Those both tested positive for blood. I did not perform the human hemoglobin test. For the stain on the front of the dollar bill, the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore. The minor contributor profile was inconclusive. And then the stain on the back, the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore. The limited minor contributor profile was inconclusive.
Burgee, I'm going to hand you what we marked as Exhibit 95, and I'll ask if you can identify that.
Yes, I can.
What is that?
These are the swabs that I collected from the Chevy Colorado when I worked it.
And you did examine at least one other knife, I believe, the black lock blade knife, and you found no blood or DNA on those objects.
It was negative for blood.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from it?
I did not test it for touch DNA.
Did you also test 3 firearms?
I did test some firearms, yes.
I will show you what's been marked previously as Exhibits 47, A, B, and C, and I'll ask if you're familiar with those objects. They're items that you performed in the testing on. We'd also move to the next Exhibit 95 after I said that.
I am familiar with those, yes.
And did you perform testing on those objects?
Yes, I did.
I believe you were looking, they had an RBS on them, is that right?
There was some staining on those, yes.
And what were the results of your testing?
For which one?
We'll start with 47A.
There was a stained area near the grip of the pistol. There was the initial test indicated blood. The testing for the presence of human blood was not performed. The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore, and the minor profile was inconclusive.
And if you would look at 47B.
There was a stained area on that pistol near the serial number, and again, the initial test indicated blood. The test for human hemoglobin was not performed, and the DNA profile obtained matches Angela Kilgore.
And the other firearm, did you do testing on 47C?
I did, yes.
And what were the results of that testing?
There were several stained areas on it. This was a revolver. All of the areas, the initial test indicated blood, and I did perform the test for human hemoglobin, and that was positive. So there was an area of RBS near the trigger guard that I swabbed. The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore. The minor profile was limited, so that was inconclusive. There was also a stain near the cylinder of that revolver. The DNA profile obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore, and the minor profile was inconclusive because it was limited. There was a stain on the trigger as well. The DNA profile obtained was consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals, including at least 1 male. The major contributor profile matches Angela Kilgore, and the minor profile is inconclusive.
Agent Burgee, you prepared several reports as part of your work, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the testing that you performed actually went over a period of time, is that a fair statement?
Yes, it did.
And I will show you, first of all, a report that shows an issue date of 5/27/16, and I'll ask if you can identify that.
Yes, this appears to be a copy of my first report.
And that report, on the beginning of the report, it indicates items of evidence and who it was received by, and gives the items a number, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then in the body of your report, it refers back to the number and it gives your analysis.
Yes.
And some of the results you testified about are reflected in several different reports, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And would you make that an exhibit to your testimony then?
Yes.
We can make that exhibit
There are a
now.
bunch of things in here that are probably not going over in the testimony. Okay, so do you object to it? I'll cover it. I'll withdraw the objection on that one. So that'd be the next number exhibit.
That'd be 96. Agent Burgee, let me hand you a report dated June 30th of 2016, and is that a copy of your report?
Yes, it appears to be.
And would you make that an exhibit? That'd be 97.
Because there are things in here that are definitely not in evidence. What? There are items listed, I object to it, there are items listed that are not in evidence.
I'll suspend the objection, take it back. To let everyone to introduce a redacted form, sure we can do that.
Okay. mark it for identification at this time, Your Honor, and we may redact it. I'm not sure. We'll hand a report 1024-16, and I'll ask, can you identify that?
Yes.
Yes, that be marked as the next exhibit.
Just one moment, Joe.
I don't know. Let's just see.
Where that is?
97.
Nice, it's a reservation.
If we can make that 98, not mark the other, the June 30th for identification is 97, that would be clear on the record.
So the last one will be 98, and the other will be 97 just for identification.
Yes.
That's what it works.
Oh, I said no objection, sorry.
What?
Excuse me, there was no objection to the last.
Okay, so 98 comes in.
And Agent Burgee, Exhibit 97, and you would look at that, and that lists several items, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Exhibit 97 is going to be the report of June the 30th. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir.
And starting at the top, you show exhibit number 22A, buccal swabs from Angela Kilgore, and you testified about those, is that right?
Yes.
And exhibit 21A is the lighter fluid can from the crime scene, you testified about that.
Yes.
Item 1A is a gas can, and item 15B are paper towels from the crime scene.
Yes.
Agent Burgee, did you do any testing on the gas can or the paper towels? Well, the paper towels you tested.
Right. I've already testified to the paper towels. The gas can, I did do some testing on that.
And what were the results of your tests on the gas can?
So there were a couple areas that I swabbed on the gas can. I swabbed the handle area, and then I also swabbed the front bottom edge where you might hold if you were using the gas can. So for the handle, the DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. Due to the limited profile obtained, interpretation was inconclusive. As far as the front bottom edge area that I swabbed, no DNA profile was obtained.
The other items on the list, of course, the Chevy Colorado, you testified about that. You did some swabbing from the Colorado, and you testified about those results.
Yes.
And some of yours, on the swabs from the Chevy Colorado, you testified to the one that matched the victim, Jerry Ridge. Were there other swabs from the Colorado?
There were, yes.
Were you able to develop any evidence from those?
Some of them, yes.
And what were the results of the other swabs from the Colorado?
So there were several areas of RBS in the Colorado that I swabbed and tested. All of them initially tested positive for blood. None of them were enough sample for me to test for human hemoglobin. There was a stain on the driver's seat belt buckle. That DNA profile matches Angela Kilgore. There was an area that tested positive on the gear shift. That resulted in a limited DNA profile, which because it was so limited, it was inconclusive. There was also a small stain from the rear view mirror, and no DNA profile was able to be obtained from that stain.
You also noted on your list the knife from the glove box, the Chevy Colorado. Did you do any testing on that, number 32A?
No, I did not.
Did you observe any RBS on the knife from the glove box?
No, I did not.
And you've also identified 33A as a knife from under the driver's seat of the Chevy Colorado. Did you do any testing on that?
No, sir.
Did you observe any RBS?
No, I did not.
And lastly, 34A, the machete from the Chevy Colorado. Did you do any testing on that?
No, sir.
And the same question, did you observe any RBS on those items?
No, I did not.
And did you see any reason to conduct any testing without observing any RBS?
No, I did not.
And Agent Burgee, does that cover all the items? I believe you testified. The only other item, there was a rifle from the pawn shop, 57A. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And did you do testing on the rifle from the pawn shop?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did that have the presence of blood?
It did. There were a few stained areas that I tested, one near the barrel of the rifle and then another near the butt of the gun. Both of those tested positive for blood as well as tested positive for the presence of human hemoglobin.
And does that cover everything that was submitted? You testified about everything that's contained in the June 30th, 2016 report?
I believe so.
Your Honor, we would move that into evidence at this point.
Okay, objection.
No, sir.
Number 97. Hi, Mr. Mom. Yes, sir.
I'll get no further questions from Agent Burgee at this time.
Thanks for the cross-examination.
Did you bring a file?
I have my notes, yes.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at, well, let's go through a couple things first, I guess. Skin cells are also known as epithelial cells. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you get DNA from what is known as blood, that is typically from white blood cells, correct?
That's true, yes.
And when you really can't tell the difference between skin cell DNA and white blood cell DNA, correct?
As far as the DNA profile is concerned?
Correct.
That's true. It'll give you the same DNA profile.
So the reason why you do, well, let me back up. Would it be fair to say that you can have, well, let me back up even further. There is something called DNA transfer, correct?
That's possible.
Okay. DNA transfer is where you may rub a surface and somebody else may touch the surface and put it on an object, correct?
That's possible.
Okay, but it's not just possible, it's a known principle of forensic science.
There has definitely been research on transfer DNA in the forensic field.
Okay, and definitely research that says it's possible, and not only possible, but happens all the time.
It's definitely something that can occur.
Okay, and that's something you're keep an eye out for, correct?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Do you see if that's possible when you test?
I'm not really sure there's a way to
Okay, so when you
distinguish.
test for DNA or a DNA profile, you're not, having an opinion as to when it got there, correct?
That's true. I cannot tell when a sample was left.
And you cannot tell what type of DNA it is when you test it by DNA alone, a DNA test alone.
That's true. That's why I do some initial testing to determine if there's a bodily fluid on a piece of evidence.
So if you have a bodily fluid and something called touch DNA mixed together, you don't know whether you have touch DNA or DNA from the white blood cell. Is that correct?
It would depend on the sample. With touch DNA, there is typically not as much DNA present in those types of samples as opposed to, say, a blood stain or a semen stain, but it just depends on the sample because some blood stains aren't as prominent as others.
Okay. So let's talk about the glove. Okay. You took some DNA from the glove, a DNA sample, correct?
I tested several areas from the glove, yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what the concentration of DNA was that you took off the glove?
Which area are you referring to?
Well, each area. Let's start with that.
Okay.
Although I guess specifically we can talk about 15A, and I have it listed as number 4.
So you wanted the concentration of DNA in that sample? Mm-hmm. It was, so...
Was that .113?
Yes, it was. It was 0.113 nanograms.
Okay. And give us an idea, nanogram, I mean, there's milligrams, there's kilograms, nanograms is incredibly small. Would that be fair?
It is, yes.
Okay. And I believe you extracted on at least A4 25 nanograms, is that correct? What was the total extraction of DNA with regard to A4?
You're talking about 15A4?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about how many microliters the sample was?
Yes.
Okay. My final volume after I performed extraction, which is breaking open the cells and removing the DNA from those cells. That's the first step of the DNA process. So my final volume when I was done with that process of liquid was 25 microliters.
That's also an incredibly tiny volume.
It's a very small volume. In forensic DNA testing, we're dealing with very small volumes as well as very small amounts of DNA because each cell has a small amount of DNA.
And ultimately, the whole sample basically had approximately 471 cells. Is that correct? Or 0.06 nanograms per cell.
I guess I'm not really sure what you're...
Okay, how many total cells were there in the sample?
That's not something that we calculate. The second step of the DNA process is to determine how much DNA is in the sample. That's something that's required. So that was, the concentration was 0.113 nanograms per microliter.
And when you multiply that by the total volume, you get 2.825 nanograms. Is that right?
I'm unsure. I'd have to have a calculator.
Okay. Assuming, I'll give you a calculator in a minute, but did you bring a calculator with you?
I did not, no, sir.
Well, assuming 0.113 times 25 is approximately 2.825, how many cells are in there?
I would again need a calculator to...
Well, would you agree with me that I'll get the calculator in a minute, would you agree with me that the ratio of the major contributor to the minor contributor is about 8-to-1?
I'm not sure where you're getting that number from.
Okay. I'm just trying to pull up a calculator. not as technically minded as you would think. Or not think. Yeah, person. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
What do you want to do?
Well, I asked her to calculate the concentration of DNA times the total volume. To get the total DNA extracted
For the whole sample, is that
for
what you'd like?
15A4.
Okay. So it wouldn't, by the time I've done my quantitation, I would have used a portion of the sample for that to be able to determine, so there would be approximately 23 microliters left. So that would be what I would calculate.
Okay. And the amount of cells from the major contributor and the minor contributor is about an ratio of 8 to 1? Would you-
Let's see. I lost the calculator. Could you? Is it? Oh, I found it. Thank you. I'm sorry. It seems like it depends on what area you're looking at. Would depend on the ratio. It's not a
Okay, well, we were
consistent
talking about
amount.
that. You have it listed as 15A4, I believe, the sample.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And you weren't able to do that calculation?
It depends on the area of the DNA.
What you pulled out? I mean, you came up with certain numbers with regard to the concentration and the extract volume. Would that be fair?
I'm not sure what the.
Okay. You said there are 25 nanograms, I'm sorry, 45 units per milliliter, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Well, let's go back. Would you agree with me that there's a small amount of minor contributor cells?
That's correct. It is a minor contributor, which means that person is contributing less DNA to the profile.
Okay. Not only less DNA, but a tiny amount of DNA, as forensically speaking.
Again, the definition of a minor contributor is someone that is contributing less amount of DNA, yes.
Well, is it consistent with touch DNA?
It could be, yes.
Is it consistent with transfer DNA?
That's possible, but there's no way to know if something has been transferred.
Okay. No way to know. Again, transfer DNA is if I shake hands with you and you shake hands with somebody else, that other person may have my DNA, correct? From skin cells?
It's possible. It depends on a lot of variables, how much a person sheds skin cells, what kind of contact was had, if it was a rough contact versus something softer. So it really depends, but it's possible.
And it's possible for just about everything you've tested here today, correct? Or you testified about today.
I would say that if I tested a stain, the stain produced the DNA profile. If that stain was transferred onto that item, that's possible. If you imagine a wet item touching another item, there could be transfer there, but I'm dealing with particular stains that I'm swabbing, so I would say that DNA profile came from that stain.
Well, it came from the stain, but nobody's saying how the DNA got to the stain, correct?
If it's a blood stain, based on my DNA testing and my experience, I would say that typically the major contributor or the person that it matches, it came from that blood stain, just based on how much DNA is present in blood.
Typically, but not for certain.
That's true. Anything is possible.
We have nothing further, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my trial partner and I disagree on whether you accepted Agent Burgee as an expert. I thought you did, but General Shelton, I think you did, and I thought we did.
If I didn't, y'all report our firm then?
I thought you did, Jim.
I thought you did too.
Stand corrected.
Okay.
I always defer to
I'll
General
let her
Shelton.
give her opinion this next week.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. You said that, you restate the form for All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our work for today, so good job. Got a lot of stuff done, so I appreciate all council, all council working hard for that. What we'll do is we'll recess now until tomorrow morning at 8:30. You can leave your legal pads and pens there, nobody's gonna liquidate or bottle them. It's also important to remember my instructions to you earlier, not to discuss the case among yourselves or two or three to talk about anything like that. We can only talk about the case after you've heard all the evidence, and I give you my instructions. Anybody do that? And I want to tell you, I think it's just everybody. All of y'all really paid attention today, and I watched, and that's a great thing. So it really honored your position as jurors today, so thank y'all for doing that. I hope you have a very nice evening. Everybody rise, please. Thank you. Have a seat. I told you that the email y'all the jury instructions I worked on. I read them again, I found two things I didn't like, so I sent another email, so don't send it yet, but hopefully it'll be sent to you by this evening. That's my goal. And tomorrow, we'll proceed on. Do y'all have any idea how many more witnesses y'all got?
Your Honor, we had Detective Johnson, another deputy, and the medical examiner. I would anticipate we'll be done certainly by lunch tomorrow.
Okay. All right, we'll proceed on things that we get done with that. And like I said, I'll try to give you all the time so you can look at the jury instructions to see the things you want me to add or what your suggestions regarding that. Okay? Counsel, anything else for y'all today? All right, thank y'all. Y'all did a great job today. Thank y'all for getting all this work done. Very good.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, I'll see y'all tomorrow, 8:30. Thank you.
All rise.